Commentary on the Gospel of Mark, chapter 11, verse 11 to 25, by the Fathers of the Church. And Jesus entered into Jerusalem and into the temple, and when he had looked around about upon all things, and now the eventide was come, he went out unto Bethany with the 12. And on the morrow, when they were come from Bethany, he was hungry. And seeing a fig tree afar off having leaves, he came, if haply he might find anything thereon. And when he came to it, he found nothing but leaves, for the time of figs was not yet. And Jesus answered and said unto it, No man eat fruit of thee hereafter forever. And his disciples heard it. Bede says, as the time of his passion approached, the Lord wished to approach to the place of his passion in order to intimate that he underwent death of his own accord. Wherefore it is said, and Jesus entered into Jerusalem and into the temple. Then by his going to the temple on first entering the city, he shews us beforehand a form of religion, which we are to follow, that if by chance we enter a place where there is a house of prayer, we should first turn aside to eat. We should also understand from this that such was the poverty of the Lord, and so far was he from flattering man, that in so large a city he found no one to be his host, no abiding place, but lived in a small country place with Lazarus and his sisters, for Bethany is a hamlet of the Jews. Wherefore there follows, and when he had looked around about upon all things, that is to see whether anyone would take him in, and now the eventide was come, he went out into Bethany with the 12. Nor did he do this once only, but during all the 5 days, from the time that he came to Jerusalem to the day of his passion. He used always to do the same thing. During the day he taught in the temple, but at night he went out and dwelt in the Mount of Olives. It goes on, and on the morrow, when they were come from Bethany, he was hungry. St. John Chrysostom, in his commentary of St. Matthew, says, how is it that he was hungry in the morning? As Matthew says, if it were not by an economy he permitted it to his flesh, there follows, and seeing a fig tree afar off having leaves, he came, if haply he might find anything thereon. Now it is evident that this expresses a conjecture of the disciples who thought that it was for this reason that Christ came to the fig tree, and that it was cursed because he found no fruit upon it. For it goes on, and when he came to it, he found nothing but leaves, for the time of figs was not yet. And Jesus answered and said unto it, No man eat fruit of thee hereafter forever. If he therefore cursed the fig tree for his disciples' sake, that they might have faith in him, for he everywhere distributed blessings and punished no one, yet at the same time it was right to give them a proof of his chastising power, that they might learn that he could even cause the persecuting Jews to wither away. He was, however, unwilling to give this proof on men, wherefore he shewed them on a plant a sign of his power of punishing. This proves that he came to the fig tree principally for this reason, and not on account of his hunger, for who is so silly as to suppose that in the morning he felt so greatly the pains of hunger, or what prevented the Lord from eating before he left Bethany. Nor can it be said that the sight of the figs excited his appetite to hunger, for it was not the season of figs. And if he were hungry, why did he not seek food elsewhere rather than from a fig tree which could not yield fruit before its time? What punishment also did the fig tree deserve for not having fruit before its time? From all this, then, we may infer that he wished to shew his power, that their minds might not be broken by his passion. Theophylact, wishing to shew his disciples that if he chose he could in a moment exterminate those who were about to crucify him. In a mystical sense, however, the Lord entered into the temple, but came out of it again to shew that he left it desolate and open to the spoiler. Bede. Farther, he looks round about upon the hearts of all, and when in those who opposed the truth he found no place to lay his head, he retires to the faithful, then takes up his abode with those who obey him. For Bethany means the house of obedience. Pseudo-Jerome. He went in the morning to the Jews and visits us in the eventide of the world. Bede. Just in the same way as he speaks parables, so also his deeds are parables. Therefore he comes hungry to seek fruit of the fig tree, and though he knew the time of figs was not yet, he condemns it to perpetual bareness, that he might shew that the Jewish people could not be saved through the leaves, that is, the words of righteousness, which it had without fruit, that is, good works, but should be cut down and cast into the fire. Hungering, therefore, that is, desiring the salvation of mankind, he saw the fig tree, which is the Jewish people, having leaves, or the words of the law and the prophets, and he sought upon it the fruit of good works by teaching them, by rebuking them, by working miracles, and he found it not, and therefore condemned it. Do you too, unless you would be condemned by Christ in the judgment, beware of being a barren tree, but rather offer to Christ the fruit of piety which he requires. Bede. What the Lord had done in figure when he cursed the barren fig tree, he now shews more openly by casting out the wicked from the temple. For the fig tree was not in fault in not having fruit before its time, but the priests were blamable. Wherefore it is said, and they come to Jerusalem, and Jesus went into the temple and began to cast out them that sold and bought in the temple. Nevertheless, it is probable that he found them buying and selling in the temple things which were necessary for its ministry. If then the Lord forbids men to carry on in the temple worldly matters, which they might freely do anywhere else, how much more do they deserve a greater portion of the anger of heaven, who carry on in the temple consecrated to him those things which are unlawful wherever they may be done. It goes on, and he taught, saying unto them, My house shall be called of all nations the house of prayer. But you have made it a den of thieves, according to Jeremiah. He says, to all nations, not to the Jewish nation alone, nor in the city of Jerusalem alone, but over the whole world. And he does not say a house of bulls, goats, and rams, but of prayer. Theophylact. Further, he calls the temple a den of thieves, on account of the money gained there, for thieves always troop together for gain. Since then they sold those animals which were offered in sacrifice for the sake of gain, he called them thieves. Bede. For they were in the temple for this purpose, either that they might persecute with corporal pains those who did not bring gifts, or spiritually kill those who did. The mind and conscience of the faithful is also the temple and the house of God, but if it puts forth perverse thoughts to the hurt of anyone, it may be said that thieves haunt it as a den. Therefore, the mind of the faithful becomes the den of a thief. When leaving the simplicity of holiness, it plans that which may hurt others. And when even was come, he went out of the city, and in the morning as they passed by, they saw the fig tree dried up from the roots. And Peter, calling to remembrance, says unto him, Master, behold, the fig tree which thou cursed is withered away. And Jesus answering said unto them, Have faith in God. For verily I say unto you, that whosoever shall say unto this mountain, Be thou removed, and be thou cast into the sea, and shall not doubt in his heart, but shall believe that those are things which he said. Therefore I say unto you, what things soever you desire when you pray, believe that you receive them, and you shall have them. And when you stand praying, forgive, if you have aught against any, that your Father also which is in heaven may forgive you your trespasses. But if you do not forgive, neither will your Father which is in heaven forgive your trespasses. The Pseudo-Jerome says, The Lord, leaving darkness behind him in the hearts of the Jews, went out as the sun from that city to another which is well disposed and obedient. And this is what is meant when it is said, And when even was come, he went out of the city. But the sun sets in one place, rises in another, for the light taken from the scribes shines in the apostles. Wherefore he returns into the city, on which account there is added, and in the morning as they pass by, that is going into the city, they saw the fig tree dried up from the root. Theophylact says, The greatness of the miracle appears in the drying up so juicy and green a tree. But thou, Matthew, says that the fig tree was at once dried up, and that the disciples on seeing it wondered. There is no reason for perplexity. Thou, Mark, now says that the disciples saw the fig tree dried up on the morrow. For what Matthew says must be understood to mean that they did not see it at once, but on the next day. St. Augustine says, The meaning is not that it dried up at the time when they saw it, but immediately after the word of the Lord. For they saw it not beginning to dry up, but completely dried up. And they thus understood that it had withered immediately after our Lord spoke. The Pseudo-Jerome adds, Now the fig tree withered from the roots is the synagogue withered from Cain, and the rest, from whom all the blood from Abel up to Zechariah is required. Bede. Further, the fig tree was dried up from the roots to shew that the nation was impious, not only for a time and in part, and was to be smitten forever, not merely to be afflicted by the attacks of nations from without, and then to be freed, as had often been done, or else it was dried up from the roots, to shew that it was stripped not only of the external favor of man, but altogether of the favor of heaven within it. And for it lost both its life in heaven and its country on earth. Pseudo-Jerome says, Peter perceives the dry root which is cut off and has been replaced by the beautiful and fruitful olive called by the Lord. Wherefore it goes on, and Peter, calling to remembrance, said unto him, Master, behold, the fig tree which you cursed is withered away. St. John Chrysostom says, the wonder of the disciples was the consequence of imperfect faith, for this was no great thing for God to do. Since then they did not clearly know his power, their ignorance made them break out into wonder. And therefore it is added, and Jesus answering said unto them, Have faith in God. For verily I say unto you, that whosoever shall say unto this mountain, etc., that is, you shall not only be able to dry up a tree, but also to change a mountain by their command and order. Theophylact. Consider the divine mercy, how it confers on us, if we approach him in faith, the power of miracles, which he himself possesses by nature, so that we should be able even to change mountains. Bede. The Gentiles who have attacked the Church are in the habit of objecting to us that we have never had full faith in God, for we have never been able to change mountains. It could, however, be done if necessity called for it, as once we read that it was done by the prayers of the blessed Father Gregory of Neo-Caesarea, Bishop of Pontius, by which a mountain left as much space of ground for the inhabitants of a city as they wanted. St. John Chrysostom adds, or else, as he did not dry up the fig tree for its own sake, but for a sign that Jerusalem should come to destruction, in order to shew his power, in the same way we must also understand the promise concerning the mountain, Thou, a removal of this sort is not impossible with God.